Do you need one right now? Because I'm probably good for a bit.
I'm fine.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I wasn't sure.
So I was in the bathroom.
Did you send it?
No, it's
Okay.
new, so I'm gonna wait.
No worries, I just wanted to be clear.
Okay, everyone is ready for me to send the one I see?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have sent the one I see. Once everyone is up, I will, yeah.
I'm good.
Cool.
I haven't gotten it yet.
I haven't gotten it, okay.
Charger's not working. Is there an extra space in there?
You can unplug mine. That's fine later, but like, yeah, some point. Yeah, no worries.
I was like, I got that switch. Oh, now I can. No worries.
Oh, I just got it.
Okay,
Wait, okay. It's scanning for viruses. I haven't downloaded like.
you're good.
games with
The
viruses.
virus has been so slow.
Yes, it takes a century.
No, every, yeah.
Yeah, once a while, my computer is very slow now, so that's good.
Just gonna wait for.
Okay, I'm good
to
now.
sit down and then I'll just
What's up?
Okay. Can I start the one I see? Yes, everyone's good?
Please.
Cool. Current LNG exports are emissions intensive. They're inconsistent with net zero targets and hurt reproductive systems. Mercosur 24 LNG exports expansive climate commitments for South company allowed to build an export study and evaluate benefits and exporting more LNG never has given time to have contact points opportunity to update public interest determination of climate cause LNG to almost release pollutants associated with free productive system assessment of legitimate solution problems and oversupply expansion is incompatible with climate goals and unmitigated warming is essential. Every degree is critical. Thomas 24. Scientific assessment of climate advice for strong and completely network South Korea and that's why we're really responsible for climate change gets right together that's not prevented points negative. People have concepts control over result by already active substance hardness to build after people in remote conflicts order conflict breakdown mitigation create resilience and climate induced conflicts to nuclear clear 20. Climate conflict has high cycle warming exacerbating techniques to stay collapsing conflict between states risk for significant conflict until use nukes and reproductive health is rapidly declining and existential. Worksheet 23, humanity on the way to reaching traffic lines for accounts one of the emissions to fresh out of continued method analysis noted. Current average still be not about argument field of for an average of the first and greater opportunities and other effect more down ways to climate one for more precipitous high quality precipitation warning trends and EU shift away from carbon intensive LNGs and navigable net zero goals mean Europe wants to renewable energy instead. Shahabudin 24, reducing emissions after Europe changes the conversation ETS leads to reducing screening full imports and for 55 to 54% reduction 2030 RP power and to make reduction for a decrease of 100 BCM of gas for a decrease 40% renewable with that should be proceeding carbon with gas reducing method with the directive prohibits to contract on making fossil gas emission around 50% 2040 implementing a line net zero 2050 towards decarbonized gas. That means Europe will stop buying US exports go to 24 years for renewable devices US LNG business trying to bring transition jobs that LNG supply can reduce demand nothing legislation reduce emission across the entire LNG value chain for EU rights export as well as Leon Marx's US LNG to Europe starting complexity and shifting to green LNG cells lower emissions content base. Europe more willing to purchase US exports with decarbonization goals all being for 23. Carbon neutral attitude steps with LNG credit for our responsibility price to be used for the climate industry this 2050 plan increase emissions which brought to 23 will be the net zero now to invest in the global growth to action also LNG emissions and continuing a continuation of US LNG exports is key to European energy security. Submitted 24 monitoring reveal impact at the average nuclear heavy earth energy result increase cause high pricing up due to the vulnerability of European energy market shock based on the effects LNG both for super station conditions to deliver cost of energy so the depth of mineral imports into European demand renewable and nuclear energy stabilization of regional energy concentrations low carbon system increase local green emissions flooded and an analysis on geographic emission virgin LNG benefit Europe but Europe's future renewables dependence face energy crises inevitable although in all 24 US benefits renewables to reduce the limit for energy corpus supply reduction just in this global declaration last at that time with those weather from electricity highlighting country Europe time reducing gas and needs to be some increase in the industrial activities here would be expensive countries in the common global LNG rights with only benefit from for the entire world whose price sugar is a comparable Fukushima 2023 shocking you 2023 Australian strikes and European energy crisis rapidly escalates straws and great powers and goes nuclear 2022 regional confrontations with degree regional powerhouse with the conflict increase China psychology to the perspective of government successfully trying to for competition, these things, buildings, and race, especially energy, resources of reserve, results from trying to accomplish the competition, the energy, resources, companies, primary racing, coercion, rushing, the often increase the race, possibility, and especially the fact of people, especially the cases, but wars involved use of terms, the colder avenues, and space, and fact, race, cycle, all the triangles, large coalitions, and it generates energy disputes in the Mediterranean circle. 23, energy security priority for this white island is years going to be represented the recent Eastern Mediterranean energy, including college energy security concerns for financial hydrocarbon servers. Egypt, Israel, Greece, Italy, Turkey, Libya, and complex complicating reserve delimitation, extremely difficult townships, and their slaughter. Rights pursuing the one of them, but diplomacy, quite large scale conflict, Mediterranean, and vulnerable countries, the geopolitical competition at the expense of that those escalate extinction. Denmark 20, Greece and Turkey over the quarrel about oil and gas and energy research. Stakes and powers of the Europe, Africa, and Middle East, wrong and conflicts represented confrontation of Mediterranean only an active view shows how to back down the situation claim internationally. The plan solves and incorporates the social cost of carbon into FERC and DOE approval of LNG export infrastructure and creates a market advantage for green LNG and RDC 24 and UN states have between after supports because of public interest, how the trade US revenue to about the climate, investors for which climate must increase exports to DOE and less exploration for liquefaction shipping to Russia with the cost of like technology juice public interest after LNG sponsor LNG exports on trash components and plan is key to get your green LNG from the US pricing emissions based on the social cost of carbon trade certainty for the certainty that US exports are truly carbon neutral and Montemeyer 24 carbon neutral LNG system definitely totally price beauty connections to conflict is absent pricing US export never made export mandate contracts of environmental purposes to replace the police service out of jurisdiction of leaving without water mine credit operation carbon terminate on the family and key rating price system Western Green Center price to LNG reducing 3 LNG was not 3 billion repair LNG cartels and also advocates for the carbon as well as benefit markets of the fourth year shaking form measurement of effort to be sense a balance of project benefit carbon offset expanding LNG is also holding oil and turf funds US and minimizing breach strengthening LNG contracts US with net zero project authorization LNG export function policy rather than LNG demand and LNG players prioritize the shareholding of GHGs and accounting for the cost of emissions inspected received by the EU ultimately for 23 gold carbon stocks to pay cover LNG the US large export LNG carbon cover US based responding right to LNG central about LNG accounting for the PCB from EU industry thus the planned United States federal government should consider the social cost of carbon when approving liquefied natural gas export permits. The second advantage is cost benefit analysis. It's inevitable broadly, but has not been adopted by FERC 720. Over 35 years, should consider benefits of the policy for institution like the parties course of it. Embrace cost benefits and control to less competitive course continue reinforcing maintaining the red 18 to consider benefits of the independent agencies not yet embrace cost benefit once the agency is FERC and incorporation of climate costs and FERC decision making is key to democratic participation today. FERC proceeding creates an objective and transparent metric for communicating the effects of policy decisions which enable stakeholder engagement. 720 CBA defense inclusion of compromise for choice of CBA transparency for decision without independent analysis of relation stakeholders influence. The efficient of the expense of publicly sound for cost environmental cost lowering public CBA with the resource and stakeholders prioritize is incredibly valuable for public not have financial resources for the model understanding of the role CBA cost benefit transparent within the participation producing Senate or regulations legal advice independent credibility of the use CBA legal categories of cost entire action decision making one of the most important climate session climate cost actions for words for the institution without reasonably transparent accountability and only creating a transparent mechanism for communicating environmental impacts solves otherwise the highly technical nature of our proceedings to smooth public stakeholders. So 17. Most common problem of the industry companies environmental risk topics environmental effects in case of economic technical deeply environmental effects not obvious how the technical nature of market growth creative barriers for institutions makes it rather really complex and comments FERC is key. It's attempting to improve public engagement and but success relies on future policy changes. Class 22 Congress wording FERC the option wording says that the future is to be obvious and usually certain HDU says the public implicit charge for the FERC to engage the parties essentially more meaningful ways it remains to be seen whether industry class 3 centering the change and success or failure is the democratic model but offered by FERC spills over class 22 energy policy for other permanent states and public consultation potentially for expanded public concern and institutions forming for to be action on the first step to true energy democracy offer on the right to watch the evidence for the federal government for experience for public lessons offer better oaths and about future actions promoting government children by the people and increased transparency resolve the democratic deficit plaguing current cost benefit analysis code 20 informed about petitions to prevent public license the court marketing license the whole decision making to counter lower cost premium make more likely parts of the use to be the basic transparency and key steps and public trust and military and transparency CBN is susceptible to manipulated for politicians and interest groups participatory government solves everything species extinction pandemics natural resource overuse and civil wars later 22 warming diffusion of species pandemic overrides situation natural resource as the religious complex and question of governments into the configuration should decide whether how to act in civil society responded reinvent old practices for single never kind of ways handling risk by being collapses risk planetary threat Brad Foster, 24, by the last credit sponsors for the Middle East Feast, and all have time therapies, last credit sponsors facing you lost by communities act, by the administration for using losing Brazil, units, surpass our last her facility, and catastrophe, fighting, collapse upon multi and pandemics cause extinction, Capital 21, epidemics, president, human life, the disease, the fact all human life, the least of human extinction life, that's all for the rest of the large part of the universe, increase mobility, and human life, practice, spread every person, curious, that is gastric, models of the non-connect upon its name, theater, various disease characters, real sort of disease, and human extinction and nature overuse called deforestation and extinction, goals in 16 deforestation, growth, environmental problems, and changes, composites, and endangered 80% of all, biodiversity, forest, and inherent population, line forest, insect wars, cause extinction, crosshair 18, support impacts, terrorism, pandemics, stability, power copies, surrounding area, power companies, are likely deflected by short-term appeals, local actors with vested interests.
Did you send out plan?
Yeah, it was sent a while ago.
I just got it. Are you good? Who does the plan?
The United States government.
LNG exports is the only thing that the price would apply to?
It's not a price on the exports themselves. The plan incorporates the social cost of carbon when agencies make decisions about whether or not to approve them. So considering the carbon intensity of a given LNG export terminal or the export itself would be considered when they're deciding whether or not they should approve the permit. I.e., if it's more carbon intensive, the SEC would say that the cost of it is artificially increased. The SEC is determined by, the EPA. It's set at like $51 right now, which makes them more likely to reject that permit and approve permits for green LNG, which is where the carbon emissions are offset.
Okay, that makes sense. Is it a tax or cap and trade?
It's a tax.
How?
Incorporating the social cost of carbon when approving permits forces both A, the government to internalize the price, and B, for export or for the people applying for export terminals, if their thing is carbon intensive, they lose out if they don't get the contract.
Okay. We're gonna prep. I might have questions later.
Okay.
But I see how much. Are you listening?
Oh, thank you.
I see them.
What is it?
It's in the Rebuttal.
Yeah.
No, we don't. Yeah, don't. That answers it. Normal means of the plan, is it agencies just internalize, or does it require Congress to say something? Like,
DOE,
we will make
so
competition.
we modified the DOE's public interest determination about LNG exports
Okay.
and export permits, and FERC's public convenience and necessity analysis about approving
Are you
LNG
using
export
prep?
facilities.
Did you send it?
I can send it.
Okay, 9:53.
Okay, it is sent. It's 8, FERC, and then advanced.
Repeat that for me?
It's Adolf, the the FERC advantage and then the Europe advantage.
And the what advantage?
The Europe advantage
Thank
is
you.
number 1.
Appreciate it.
There's 2 and then 1, right?
Yeah.
My apologies, I'm gonna ask you to repeat it one more time. So it's
Eight
8 off, then the
second
second advantage,
advantage,
then
and
the
the
first
first
advantage. Okay, thank you. I still,
We're not good, so we're not good.
scan for viruses. Oh, I think it finished. Download the thing. Alright, good one.
I'm not good.
Everyone,
Hold on.
not ready.
My stuff is not.
This is blue, this is black. Also for green, it's a lot easier. Yeah, green is just, green. This is blue, because that was restriction date, but my stuff was green.
Okay.
Everyone's good?
Yeah.
Okay. The United States federal government should declare that foreign states members of private sector may rely on the intention of the United States to consider the social cost of farming when improving liquefied natural gas export permits and inquire before the International Court of Justice about the obligation created by this declaration and enforce the declaration is obligated. It's also the case about adopting a CEPA roadmap. 15. Court has employed eligibilities and judicial reasoning that you don't let a body commitment to government by the ILO not allow a foreign with the state treaty for person to enter legal or administrative must impose obligation binding under ILO's political commitment not like a political treaty unilateral body declaration to express consent tend to be found through unilateral statement. It breathes life into the law of unilateral commitments that catch coordination problems in Southern law. And so against 18 copies of Clark Meyer legal to make electoral NDCs as demonstrating commitment to make literal copies of it to interpret the Clark Meyer petition would undergrad the agreement by revealing it can do nothing political law. Mr. Evidence law would be completely irrelevant as Mr. NDCs for by law than the treaty unilateral declaration when other reason we agreements whether we're aligned to obligation regarding the unique law after that can lead to ruling the U.S. will not escape the application of custom extinction. Learners have seen all Earth-like beasts forever Russian even possess thousands of new session GHGs increase opportunity experiments of biotech, nanotech, particle altered viruses orange. We have no defense of system and nano consumer Earth and hybrid with cycler electron produce that black hole that ever through was illuminated the image you see broken to death super nova rates etc. RT allowed plausible mitigation global defense to play the important role in global challenge require international cooperation to know the framework range towards self access to for solution can be achieved only follow the principles of the stage for hard law use or more carbon than ever for global first the solution online natural interest. Next off, market-based instruments create a Darwinian cycle of corporate adaptation that attempt to transform capitalism, creating new offset externalities and only strengthen corporations. Fletcher 23, conservation policy, and make fair price, reduces the values for land and make capitalists optimize and only financial capital focus reinforces social dominance. Corporations control the religion, making business then corporation considers intentions making cakes. This corporation responds to include policies and prices that adapt all strongest surviving changing conditions, able to already process which corporation adapt surviving to the equation of more businesses, aspiration, or distance after render, and system its whole unsustainable basis, capitalism involves obstacles to depletion, pollution, accumulation by conservation, and new cycle to transform the obstacle source of capitalism pursues environmental fixes and equipment new avenues to overcome contradiction between contraction, conservation, offsetting conservation, and risk is definitely from extraction, which justifies the expense because processes are mutually reinforcing and symbiotic. Capitalism is unsustainable extinction. Robinson 23. Breakdown of capitalism, cost of living, contradicting the global system accumulation, escalating conflict, pushing conflagration, wars prevent allocation, for synthesis, the interfacing new conflict, collapse of biosphere inequality, immigration, disintegration. Vote next for ENT capitalist comments, collective refuse commitments and competitive principle that treat advocates of what's realistic. For that, maybe the comments become small movements of large formations, continent-wide and big comments that neither the European or French entities susceptible to cooperation what matters is and intention ENT capitalism no longer building competitive original but on collective solidarity and commitments contrary to ideological policy close alternate capitalist realism issuing at the market as stated comments coexist and based on the system directly participation and non-legal transform into responsible for creating intentions compensation and laws to establish collective management use resources as it's not good for process ongoing negotiations right using governance will be a revolution not in violent operating through interference from oligarchy to deliberative democracy. Next off trade is sky high. UNCTAD 24. Global trade president 2024 latest update for the rate of export from China. Indian U.S. increase added 250 billion dollars positive transfer history and reached $32 trillion allocation for financial policy effect emerging international policies which focus on domestic industries and trade restrictions and growth. The full interest in economic backlash attached to CBM to the plan which administrates global trade and green innovation. Question 20 policy speakers on domestic policy strengthened and he says retail leader want to put domestic restrictions Spanish costing and jobs reducing tax even more new way by adding a tier of CBMs preserve domestic argument by attaching mobile policy makers by the career changes CBMs diplomatic innovate to the economy calculating carbon up import stability leading 130% source leader by creating global league on development rules automatic pairs increasing mistrust and automatic principles uncertainty to investment already and the open by innovation by creating economic with a large block of limitation protections universal trade trading impose discriminatory tariffs and coming up with QW rules over and above life of trade CBM prompt WA challenges retaliate emotional and trade war spiral that triggers World War III collapses contain nuclear technological force and towards the environment environment device help with attack failure to find failure future structural forces impact of SE to settle natural structure and reduce increasing politics conflict weaken institutions and norms increasing capacity to prevent warping and exchange nuclear weapons and both escalating trade disputes and escalating risks as well and globalization of the geopolitical conflict damaging fields national which for the conflict trade wars leading to war of the economic trades on aggression over the trade by reducing the to make that continue with the moments to carry the pre-1940 the money has lost reason as TSO to portray entire one rekindling seems right next off Congress attacked on ET reform with the NDA now preventing internal corruption by defense contractors this NDA undermining national security compared to reforms as the ATO chief totally spends security monopoly shutting out a new start of medical religion community changes the current to origin and waiting the final legal was to streamline ATO as a part of NDA conference of press transforms the plan triggers a political firestorm Meyer 19. No one's major mission can be made through the picture of the White House, the Congress 4 years, and it's special committee bill not only in the Senate to struggle to find counter Republicans, Democratic Congress includes a moderate dance, deep tactical campaign ad must pass bill trade off with full attempt preventing add-on Hagen 1118. Dems have always spread reason. I did understand the evaluation from most of us take presidential growth and innovation and lawmakers feel confident that the defense bill has a good year in a row, likely to other measures tracked on exchange trade 20 expedition for corporation for resolution of nuclear warms raising business strategies expediting Congress being on Congress and contracting business suits so district China Russian China resource of accidental intentional aware at the expense of us. Next off decarbonization requires emissions reductions across all sectors. Bruce 19. Decarbonization requiring substantiation regardless of which sector community use has been associated with SOTA's clean energy policy failure 17 redefined later comprehensive national energy policy and policy to burn impacts on energy and overarching national energy policy that energy policy put into purposes limited focus on to the definition of bombing or exerting CEA impact on energy policy but we're not energy policy vote neg limits allowing substance forces and to be prepared against hundreds of industry specific companies or geographic regions and ground core DAs require large changes from the status quo of the nature of the length of uniqueness by letting affordance be as small as existing clean energy. Next off there's no text. Decarbonizing the Constitution solves better.
Skip that one.
Next off, adopt must be Congress Banner 7. Adopt means by law to protect the environment accordingly consistently understood adopting it is done to the negative meaning it comes included by the inclusion of duty to enact legislation, policy, statutory code, 6 policy maintaining the legislative embodied statutory language or 3 statutory interpretation. Vote neg 1 ground non-legislative action draws courts like politics or trading writers independently key to policy-based perception links to is limits Congress is binary but courts and agencies is split the top to infinite subordinate entities. Next off the United States federal government should propose that the North Atlantic Treaty Council whether the United States should consider the social cost of carbon when approving liquefied natural gas export permits and fees and solve U.S. recommendation will be adopted by the NEC and become effectively binding on all members, but the process of collective formulation without setting prior fixed policies, key to legitimacy and acceptance. Spurling 19. What matters in America is not NATO interrelated consultation is unique that NEC make it alignment possible embedded into all allies institutionalism for independent that the legitimate consultation was their techniques in favor of the office of reliable means of offsetting allies to the point of view which means articulated and Americans against proven effective and advocating new changes. Allies say yes. Anderson 13. U.S. and worry about every differences at LA generally some leaders from regard to line policy give represent the strong and remaining ally plea defense systems where they develop the use of an effective alter considering and play potential alter rate shouldn't result with the allies which whether such as changing U.S. leaders which provides ratio that they conclude the people not consider they would be really issues both will change towards allies and not make one possible to underline importance of this consultation in advance that solves emerging global threats target 16 the principle of the borders of the NATO all parts of the system must be agreed bound by members seeking such balance keep on the world state agreement and rule that they are informed instrumental for the outside paramount meeting to boost out the changing environment market changing environment advantage 2. Democratic pieces statistically proven disproven treatment. Dead pieces character available at the same time pace of also democracy being elusive of every ability to know how to make all of the durable generated relationship remain poorly understood empirically. We just by applying IVA having taken into account and democracy not an effect on past mind finding show democracy more likely to act than non-democracy makes disease control impossible. The attribute of the first of it all so always question whether democracy with Christ democracy that we of all of the 10 most effective democracies were on the sub or effective routine that's what only changes just after strong quickly again all these disease similar to strategy the effects of democracy until anybody go with Christ says access into warming example and causes a collapse extreme authoritarianism allowing democracy to decline solve lead to against the leader of democracy, the reason for interaction is imitating effects of your democracy were unable to deal how to invent an organization to coordinate, reallocate shortages, outbreaks of urgency was centralized governing adequately and outflowed out action was blocked in periods of disruptive disaster in the system that delayed heavy-handed interventions of some democracy where survival democracies and control the urgent necessities very catastrophic to the transformation of authoritarian forward democracy to self of the populace, but populace solid focus on common problem threats over the horizon. No, biody impact holds at 19 have to continue recording safety 200 units over return to EOC. Biody would have the word impossible hospital awards for the species of the using word less humans, humans, less people, rational, small, meaningfully, be able to make a judgment reduction in species not for the extra state or small scale that we live off of the biody. We've been declined by the variety, may be declined by local state market, but local state, no deforestation impact. The card is a IQ, never says causes impact, just that we rely on forests. It's thumped by deforestation in the Amazon and other countries. No civil war impact. It would have already happened. Leader 18, if you think civil wars imminent, get off digital conflagration is different little. Actually, none of this will change small number highly polarized parts of the country goes without its business. Compare 60s. Market, compare 60s. Advantage 2. No chemical extinction, crib 18 alcohol reports and self-nucleation as nations increase the weather, clean air, water, reduce pollution, combination of environmental damage, like decline pollutants, also recognized the consequences of local events that will be reasonable to respect our rainfall, active for ecotastrophe, no energy worth reading, 20 countries for 108 times over energy to ability to contain over vast amounts of rubber, phenomenal, and escalated waste, also disease, oil facing, cost of invading aggressive, is offensive and made image of Congo, I hope to avoid occupation and challenging cost of companies because of cost of invasion, opprobrium fighting, market fighting.
The unilateral declarations counterplan, does it enforce the plan at the end of the ICJ consultation?
Well, it enforces the outcome of the ICJ consultation, so that may not be that the plan is a binding regulation, but we've read evidence that it likely would be.
Whatever the outcome of that consultation is the counterplan fiat,
So this
is the thing the counterplan fiat is binding?
maybe, but also we can kick
What
the
do you mean?
last 4 words of the counterplan that say we would enforce it.
What do you mean maybe though?
It could be binding. The U.S. could enforce the ICJ ruling as binding. If you win
So
competition
we don't
arguments based,
necessarily
Our
have to
argument is
enforce
that there's
it for the purposes of
ambiguity
the
over
process.
whether unilateral declarations are binding, which is why consulting the ICJ is necessary.
Okay, so they are binding the counterplan at the
No,
end of
they may or may not be binding. We've read evidence that says the ICJ would likely interpret them to be binding, but there's not been a formal declaration that they
So
are.
why is the process key? Why does this solve the net benefit? If
Well,
it's true
because a
that we
formal
may or may not do
declaration
it?
that they are binding, as well as the U.S. adhering to the binding unilateral
So it is
disagreement, is
binding.
what creates a precedential effect.
Yeah,
No. We think like it ought to be binding, but it has not been declared, so there's
So I don't
ambiguity over whether
understand
they're
why it resolves
binding.
the net benefit. The NBAA just said, can you explain to me what the link is?
climate policies and climate actions would cause backlash in Congress. The plan would mean that every LNG export and every lobbyist
Yeah,
would
that's
have
fine.
to
I'm more so
internalize costs of
asking
emissions.
about the floor time card and the it's controversial card.
In order
Is the
to
argument only that
negotiate
it's
the amendment to the
controversial,
DA, it requires floor time to get people to agree because they haven't agreed to that aspect. The plan requires negotiations and is broadly controversial, so it
Okay.
prevents them from attacking on additional add-ons.
I understand. You got that off of
I did not hear anything you
whatever.
said.
I got you later. Okay, the trade dissad, did you read this?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. What evidence says that a CBAM is attached to the plan?
The second piece of evidence is that it gets horse traded for the plan. So in order to do the plan, they have to appease people that want protectionism, for example.
Where do you think this card says that a CBAM would get
The
attached to the
first
plan?
half, it says that it sparks competitive spheres and the solution out of that would be a CBAM.
Yeah, but where does it say it gets attached to the plan?
It says, so it says CBAMs provide a way out of the dilemma of being seen as hurting U.S.
Yes.
competitiveness.
What
So
part of the link
policymakers
that
fear
is supposedly to the
being
app
used as
is
hurting
about the plan?
competitiveness by regulating LNG exports. So in order to beat that perception, they would attach a CBAM
But
to
the
the plan.
card doesn't say that it gets attached. It just said maybe it should get attached.
We
No,
made a horse
that's
trading link
fine.
argument. We did a link.
Yeah, you're good. Did you read all the off keys?
Not con.
Okay. Are there reasons to reject the team?
Topicality is definitely a reason to reject the team.
Well, then you asked that.
I didn't say new apps are bad.
Start.
I get non-finals. I have to discussion.
both films from this one.
Oh, for sure, you're done.
Actually, I told her only one, because like, sorry, but one will never, and then one complains to me. So, but I wouldn't be surprised. I was nice.
I got that split yesterday.
I had a conversation with her yesterday.
I don't fuck with those.
Yeah, that was insane.
Why?
I'm joking.
It's so, it is like hard to focus when people are slow.
I was hoping to get like that off, so.
I thought this off for stuff because I judged novice holders yesterday. Because they
There
took
you go.
because they're not stuck. Because they took us all to stuff. And so they like forced me to do that.
I just judged the outside because I was.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that sucks. It's so it's true, it was fair.
Did you read the democracy solves warming thing, or the democracy, the warming impact of democracy bad?
Like the warming card?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. What?
I would just have it in my 17.
I have only put one on. So the rest of them are so good. That makes sense.
Oh, did you also read this May card? No.
No.
Yeah.
Got it. And Biden's LNG export and permitting cost dumps, no?
Not read.
Okay.
Start with that. That was well. Votes ready? Yes. Huh? I think we're saving for resolution. I want to get that. All our money back. Yes, it's RSDs.
I got it.
Sure.
I got it.
It's 100% off. Fuck out of here, bro. We voted. You're a punk. I actually don't know if it's on, but I don't know what I'm talking. I literally just need to make a proof of resolution. This is a. Yeah, sure. You want it? No, it's just, it was near my house, sorry.
Stop right.
It's 520 views, so we have 420.
Wait, sorry, how much?
We have
520.
440 left.
You see 520?
Yeah.
Used.
Oh, okay, okay.
440
Used.
left.
I'm sorry, I saved the doc in the wrong spot. me. Just send it.
Oh, this is just dreams.
Is everybody good for an order in the meantime?
Yeah.
Advantage 2. Advantage 1. T adopt is Congress. T subsets. The unilateral declaration counterplan. The NAC counterplan. The CAPK. The trade DA. The NDAA policy.
We're having a great time up there.
I'm sick of that.
I just got it. Okay, I'm good.
All right, everybody's they're fooling around.
You don't
over this.
No, I'm right.
Oh, sorry, Zidane, my bad.
I was just showing you a picture. I thought you were gonna do this.
Okay, panel seems good. Ready to go. Michigan, amazing. Democracy game factor is made up, it's inevitable, or an entire argument as a cost-benefit analysis is done and is inevitable, and we're not making an argument broadly about democracy, but the plan makes it effective. They have not read a link. Democracy is good and sustainable meadows. A 20 with the best boundary product, 6 of the then for what's allowed to order that will be mature. Time for us sufficient more than adoration should allow effort genuine leadership of the Trumps can never allies to shake trust in the American order. They have not destroyed American will of disproportionately same to post world Biden's platform was ambitious world revolution to reform American values and global world Biden and strong signals quickly to reform NATO focus on building a multilateral coalition counter China, building an democracy in the Western coalition and new American led world order opportunities. There the risk is Biden improves to be long and something more than short and ineffective action. The bar for an argument is a piece of one EC evidence that says democracy is going to collapse. Michigan has not pointed that out, so there's not a link. Digital authoritarianism causes info warfare. During 19 campaigns with tech change, digital platforms called authoritarian government policies, encrypted division and confusion in societies, extinction, Mechlin 123, nuclear war, are compatible with their multiplier info war, against to Iran and North Korea and Russia, continue to cover the info corruption, unmet ecosphere, decision making, dependent, heightened threats that will lead to nuclear war by design, blunder, or miscommunication. Alternatives are bad. China cannot lead in the attempt, causes breach through war, extinction, late 18, inevitably China will be on hegemon. This is not how hegemons believe, behave, create powers, dominate the quest for security. They will economic power, build military, explode rivals, and influence authority using economic and intervening in other countries. Cut the card at countries. It doesn't solve pandemics or climate change because authoritarians go rogue since they're not held accountable by audience costs. More importantly, they read a trade deal on the other page, which is dependent on democratic cooperation. Warming impact, we solve it better. Prove it above. Participatory governance impact is conceded. It's a mechanism to solve every existential risk, pandemics, biodiversity collapse, civil wars, etc. That's a lander, biodiversity collapse, obliterates the earth, key to food chains, and ecosystems and sustainability. It's the greatest threat to the planet ever. This are false evidence or defense. It's not assume that. Deforestation causes extinction, endangers a whole planet due to biodiversity, carbon sinks, and water cycles. That's our Goldstein evidence. Pandemics cause extinction. Models prove it defense. Every node in global networks that causes extinction. That's our Kim evidence. Yes, civil wars do cause extinction. They cut the card too early for a war. It draws in great powers and decreases response to X risks abroad like terror and pandemics. Government's advantage. Chemical wars is not our impact. Warming is existential. It cooks the planet. It causes famines, mass migrations, and conflicts. Tipping points means every degree matters. That's Thomas. Climate conflicts cause extinction and go nuclear. That's Clark. They've conceded that reproductive health underpins all life. Drastic decline in sperm counts causes extinction. That's a Ritchie evidence. Yes, EU energy crisis causes extinction. China, Russia, Iran, North Korea capitalize on weaknesses, which causes great power drawing. That goes nuclear. That's Turkey's evidence. Dropped Mediterranean crises also cause extinction because Greece, Turkey, Cyprus engage in gunboat diplomacy, which draws in great powers. That's our Detner evidence. He adopt. We meet. Reasonable interpretation of the plan is done by Congress. Adopt includes rulemaking. McGee 18. Adopt is by the NBA. Decree event or repeal rule. Rule means any agency regulation. Policy is the general principles by which a government is guided. It can be non-binding. Congress 19 blocks law. Device policy is the general principle by which a government is guided. These indicated policies are not necessarily determined purpose of conduct. preferred. 1. 18 counterplans. They're unfair. See the entire app. No 18 keywords on the energy topic. 2. DAs can be based off normal means. 3. Functional limits. States counterplan. Cap K. Pricing picks. Fuel mix. Politics. DAs. Reasonability. Good is good enough. Key subsets. We meet LNG export permits. Apply economy-wide because anyone can apply for an export permit. Counter intimidation. 4 means in favor of Smith. 13. 4 means for the benefit of American heritage. Definition. 4 is benefit reduction. We have in favor of all means for the benefit of decarbonization. It's a reduction in the ratio of emissions to GDP. It's on 5. Decarbonization. Decrease of CO2 emissions intensity. C emissions intensity ratio of emissions to GDP. Energy policy includes subsets from Tier 9. Energy policy and coal, electricity, oil and gas, nuclear, renewable energy, efficiency, analytical generation can be made between energy policy tool and specific subsets. We can individually general energy policy specific laws clarify subset analysis energy policy tool instead of interventions in a subset preferred. 1. Apps needs to make narrow sector-wide reforms to stay in the game. 2. Pigs, they can be out of parties that don't emit and command and control superior attacks in hard-to-weight sectors. 3. Predictability. Their evidence has no intent to define or exclude no limits or ground offense to states guideline. Solves most apps and apps are unified around a core mechanism of punishing polluters for emissions, cross-apply functional loads, and reasonability from above. Go back to T. Adopt Congress, clarifying the we mean argument. The plan says United States federal government, which means that we are not necessarily tied to agencies instead of what I said before. Go to the unilateral declarations complaint. It does not solve the case. The chance that the president can withdraw from unilateral declarations means that it's uncertain. Bradley Englishman. 18. When the president terminates the LG prescribes rules the U.S. is obliged to follow the president national lobbying powers that deep unguided firms. Government set international regulatory set of U.S. firms must abide by domestic rules that are alerted to coordinate affect firms. The president of intimidation and termination enhances his power to change the conclusions for firms. Certainty is key. Wilson 23 for reviews massive climate call for assistance and adequate for zero suggest uncertainty first terminal LG terminals CVA is not clear when it comes to the uncertainty is better for evaluation process. LG terminals have verification for energy security. Borg seems confused when reviewing exports can't get its permission. Both permission to the counterplan. It adopts a clean energy policy. You said enforce the obligation in the counterplan, and the first card says that it is legally binding. Permission to plan and counterplan on another issue. It's not intrinsic because it includes the counterplan's process. Specification on the plan is an additional step. The permission removes process counterplans. Destroy off ground because they're unpredictable and decenter topic. Permission to adopt the plan by the counterplan's method policy formulation. Theodule 95 from part of the management. It shows stages or designating relation rules adoption and implementation. Look at interactions of various governmental participants. Multiple relation of course of action does not always result in adoption. Formulation 2 step first a decision one to be on second. Policy draft that if the obligation is scheduled with people in decision policy adoption to alternative. Relations thoughts after decision to adopt defined to directly change the follows adoption. Now, no net benefit. One shot does not spill over. ICJ credibility is high now because of Ukraine and Putin suits, and there is no impact reject. Let's go to the NAC counterplan. Permission to counterplan. They said it's binding. Permission to both. Permission to the plan and counterplan on other issues. Text is inserted in the doc. Cross-apply policy formulation from above. Certainty is key. Otherwise, companies will not scale up green LNG, and cost-benefit analysis is not credible, and the EU will not import cross-apply the Wilson evidence from above. Say no. Trump, Congress, and the courts also applies to the unilateral counterplan above. Action 24. Biden number review to update set to determine if LNG terminals within the public interest policy groups includes in oil. Republicans came after and Margaret Wallace, Trump judge LNG held that LNG must still less attacking criminal pollution. Technology tax from your review and cruise. Trump is unlikely to allow the UTs on the public interest. Two members do everything to get about it back right. So they need a solvency advocate key to prep which determines fairness. We get new answers. Picks are also bad. They're bad. They steal the affirmative and dilute education on core questions. There's no net benefit because one shot does not spill over to broad NATO relations or revitalizing the NAC more broadly because it's a fake organization, or the NAC is high now. Reject logical impacts. Go to the Cap K framework. Evaluate the plan versus competitive alternative key to fairness. The plan is the locus of affirmative offense, and it's uncritical to hold the app to infinite epistemic or ontological assumptions. 2. Permutation to regulated capitals themselves and fast riders. 25 capitals and huge. First of these was regulated regular laws resulting in 08 the free market is not capable of using well-being of a profit cap. It should be rewarded as a profit in decarbonizing. 3. Only the plan solves internationally. Other countries thought they were bad, but we solved it internationally through green LNG exports. 4. Competition is key to innovation. Linciome 21. The info needed to secure best use of resources exists to disperse bits of knowledge. This info is intelligence cannot discern by accuracy statistics, not market activity. But there are because environmental loss if knowledge fire price signals market content involving guys. How much industrial policy is designed will inevitably different than facts at the time of the proof. They will likely change again. Innovation solves existential risks. Callahan 20. Positive externalities will research the value extraordinarily large in the black swan phenomenon. Research protect from existential threats. We want to research novel innovation different than more explicit think quickly rated. Research to find keep monitoring existential threats. Research could go further than the next threat. Might be existential virus of mutates evade vaccines and drugs has high mortality equivalent threat. The human life itself cut the card and human life itself cap is good and self-correcting. T 22. Further the innovation that needed can combat with capitalism can lead to renewables can become the cheapest source. We see relation of capitalism on the environment could yield progress protracted growth could be mimicked. Data relation moves out any possibility could return due to technology with aggressive growth on the alternative quality we counter run civilization seeds off a crisis through innovation. They said trade go to the other page. It's a DA the alternative destroys trade and it causes a European energy crisis. Code 24 anti-capitalism conditions alliance around free market policies design run growth that lead to the deficits. Countries respond parts sparking more economic natural stimulation and global fuels risk constantly range a co-op on security tech and environment. The impact is European energy security and also a trade from the other page, and they cannot solve the alternative maintains growth which they think is unsustainable. Go to the trade DA. No link. The plan sustains LNG exports in the long term. China trade war discrimination between FTA and non-FTA countries, and Biden's LNG export pause. Thumbs market 24. What are the pause? But the involves protecting 200 million acres and canceling gas stations with timber supplying natural gas. Priests not been well received. These have been running in between all ideas to be the most exporter and put it down the question. Bruin and simply will have the about it not be willing to follow the United States' lead. And no, the CBAM is obviously not a tax. What the fuck are we talking about? Their evidence is about a carbon tax. It does not link to the app. No, World War I disproves their, and yeah, NDADA, scratch the impact defense. DOE and FERC shields, book it all 24, counter and section pre-enacting laws, nuclear even one controls both cameras in the executive and filibuster break legislation executives. Likely DOE will take a look at impacts of LNG exports on environment. Biden agency action, thumbs, Joseph Low, 24 Biden region. Continue progress in the drilling, not setting justifying pause on LNG exports. Trump unpartly on its specific and doesn't the policy stays too slow, but not stop the president agenda. Nothing passes ever. Wilson Berger, 11th party has been more time and jousting than Trump's open like it's not dramatic knowledge whether anything can change political paralysis. Heroes co-op seems elusive as ever in our history. Seems to be determined by earth-shaking crisis like war. Such peoples cannot be programmed on a man. Biden is zero PC. He's a lame duck president. Fiat means the plan happens instantly, which solves the link. Actually, a DA is not intrinsic law to policymaker can do the plan and also do the thing the DA is talking about. Must pass links are inevitable because we're in the lame duck and no internal link. And there is obviously no internal link because their impact card does not actually say that we need to pass the NDAA, and a CR is inevitable. Chapter 1114, Trump's these are need to together the last system for the leader, notification comes in towards the CR, or irreconcilable difference, otherwise any agreement, Riley 10-1, before by accountable can go to the law because of the difference to the House and divisive conservative assembly believes more than two lawmakers will be pushing during request, not very major seeking what will need to be overcome. Go back to the trade DA, terrorist thump, Williams, 24, LNG can face new hurdles with 60% terrorist on China, permitting community cutting China, removing contracts and re-exporting cargoes. That card is marked at cargoes.
Are you good?
Yep.
Okay. First question, you read a piece of evidence that says that LNG exports thump. Why don't they thump the app?
So which card are you referring to?
On the trade DA?
On the trade DA. You mean the export pause?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the export pause was repealed to the extent that it was repealed by a judge in like Missouri or
Sure, but my question
export
is,
pause.
you read evidence that your continuation of exports is necessary in order to prevent all of the app's impacts. Given that they were paused, why didn't energy wars break out?
It's about green LNG. The export pause was on all
No,
LNG.
you read
We think
evidence
some
that was
LNG
tagged the
exports are good.
continuation
What's your
of
question?
LNG exports is key to prevent war. My question is, given that they were paused, why didn't an energy crisis break
Green
out?
ones. Those did not
Yes,
exist
so-
when the export pause happened. It was only on all LNG. We think
No,
that
it
green
literally
LNG
says
exports are good.
continuation of U.S. LNG exports is key to European energy security, and this piece of evidence is written
The-
as a
the
criticism
pause-
of the pause.
The pause happened for 2 months. Our argument on the first advantage
No,
is
it
that
happened
LNG
for way more than 2
No,
months.
it happened for like 2 months, and then it got rolled back. And then our point is that LNG demand is structurally unsustainable over the medium term, which means that we need
And
green
do you think
LNG
the
to
reason
sell to
it's
Europe.
unsustainable just because it's green, it's not green, and Europe won't
Yes,
consume
because
green
Europe
LNG?
is trying to comply with its net
Okay.
zero targets.
I don't understand, if Europe is on the cusp of an energy crisis where they would literally go to war, why would they not just accept LNG exports, make an exception?
Well, they would try. They think that relying on renewables is good enough, but renewables lead to an energy crisis.
That
All
just
this is
seems
dropped
so
after 1 month.
irrational. Why wouldn't they just pause those
Not irrational.
policies
They
or
prescribed
allow
it and set
imports
out
of
numerous
LNG to come
policies
in?
like the Repower EU plan and a bunch of net zero goals.
But
like
given what you've described,
for
which is
55.
Europe is on the cusp of war with Russia, why would they not just allow the exports?
I don't know. I think I've explained myself pretty well. These also are not proponents of arguments.
Okay, sure. The participatory democracy Interlink, who participates?
Stakeholders, so people that are, for example,
So in the
environmental groups
context
that
of
submit
FERC,
comments.
who participates?
Yeah, so environmental groups that submit comments.
Okay, so I just don't understand all of the impacts you've listed. What is notice and comment? What does that materially do for things like climate change, like nuclear war that you've inserted in your laundry list?
Well, our argument is that the democratic structure of the United States is inevitable. However, it's kind of unaccountable right now. We need to involve stakeholders into the process to make it more transparent.
Okay,
It's also
but
the
why
new
does
text, right? It's by
transparency
making
necessarily
democracy
translate to better
participatory.
policy outcomes?
Because it makes sure that the United States can take input from stakeholders when it attempts to make decisions.
But why does that input necessarily alter the outcomes of policies? Why would the government take that into account?
So the government would take it into account because, the plan sets a precedent as a result of the FERC, incorporating the social cost of carbon into its decision-making
Reasons
process.
to reject
makes
the
that stuff
team,
binding.
picks, process, counter plans. What other ones?
That's probably it. And neither of those are reasons to reject the team, just reasons to reject the argument.
Okay.
9.
9:53.
Yes, you have to accept that.
Wait. No, down. Stay. We're not doing it.
You know, feel the vibe. How about yourself?
Fine. Debated MSU. Did you go for T?
Yeah, we defined at the top. We like, procedurally constrained.
That's good.
So we don't think they're referring to stop.
Okay, who you go for T?
NSU.
MSU, the worst violator of the resolution.
Worse than us.
That's actually kind of dumb. Oh, except, I don't know.
I heard apparently we have a reputation for being on top of that.
Yeah, but yours is a little more wholesome. Yours is like, it should have been transmission. MSU is just like liability should just be barrels.
Did you also the context in Michigan Stu was like the United States should establish a liability instrument for greenwashed emissions or something? What was the one last week? Like greenwashing transition.
I get it.
Decarbonization.
There was
Yeah.
finance in there somewhere.
Greenwash
Transition.
finance transition.
Transition.
I hated negating MSU ass last year because I always wanted to go for substance, but I kept like negating. And then I just didn't want to go for. I didn't want to K and go for T ever. And so,
Okay.
and so it's just like, oh, shit.
Wait, I actually don't know this. It should be sent now.
I really should have been going for T.
The order is the Unilite counterplane, the NEC counterplane, the CAPK, the LNG advantage with all the chemical Europe stuff, then the torque advantage.
Back to that.
Okay. Yeah. No, one. Okay. Unilite, NEC, the CAPK, LNG, so 1 with the Europe and Mediterranean stuff, then 2 with democracy.
I'm sorry, I need you to repeat that all over again.
Okay. Unilite,
Yep.
NEC,
Give me a second. So, Unilab, NAC, then?
the CAPK,
Okay.
1 then 2.
Thank you.
Okay.
Democracy of the donkey.
I got it down in the doc. Oh, I don't have it.
No,
Is the panel good?
not yet.
Okay. That was like one of them. Are you both good?
No.
Okay. Nobody's good. Griffith, you're the only one. Okay, panel good now. Okay.
Good.
Okay. Concede do both not going to go for, but on the kind of NSC, same thing. Concede do both not going to go for, but concede that picks are bad means that they don't get offense on Topicality because course counterplays will not be allowed because they're picks out of Asian, which means that there's no offense on the Topicality page when the one in our extent that they can't get concede do both not going to go for. But I'm going to explicitly concede that you should strike all laundry list impacts. You should strike every single one off the one AC. You cannot tie to an external impact because they said that they are silly. The LNG advantage. There's no impact to chemical pollution or reproductive health. Wealth is increasing. Pollution is broadly declining. Economies are becoming circular. Tracy said we did not read a chemicals impact. All of that was defense, which zeros the fertility impact because it's based on air pollution. Economies becoming circular is able to resolve that no extinction risk in 23 missile fertility crisis with current technology humanity will. Extinction technology makes it impossible. European war. There's no energy wars. Oil spats are non-fatal. They're risk averse because they don't want to do damage to infrastructure and fighting does not pay off, which is the one you see near the evidence. It defies logic. Who in Europe goes nuclear? Why would they attack Russia? This all relies on Russia invading Europe, or there's no incentive for the country to escalate, or the Ukrainian conflict itself shut down because Europe should have gotten involved. You should have gotten involved. No, Balkans or European war. President of the decision of the balance between Russia first would reach Western Europe, Germany, democracy, deal, ancient religious, public, actually Germany, the Finnish South to balancing France, Britain, force barely master a brigades, also for the issue. They would have mobilizing or venture abroad. Their evidence isolates that there's internal pressures external to energy that would cause countries to go to war, given that Europe's populace are on the rise. It will not escalate. It should come in 23 like little Russia is new action ability would the mysterious consider Putin will love the legal ability. It's not suicide Putin will leverage the potential nuclear tactical nuclear response. The extent with leader for desperate leverage Russia resource influence away. The Russia war not popularly reported emerged like a confidence. Leaders in news 1 OG Indoctrinate calls for war, has attacked Russian forces on a nuclear factory, and in retaliation, you've lost operational ability, or given to understand Russia if we were to not launch a nuclear weapon. Mediterranean war. No, nobody wants it. Arcturian 20. Neither sex one is conflict. Turkey has been punching competition. The key to avoid Athens, so to power Turkey can solid Europe. This war is fanciful because no other country side with Greece conflict. NATO states impose non-ality limitation and such. This is not biased to either Russia, honest mediator, Germany, playing peace advocate. Can you give me crisis stability, use it or lose it defense, and impact defense? Lastly, nobody wants to escalate. There, when you see evidence list places like countries like Italy and Greece, none of them have nuclear weapons. The final line of the card just says that it'd be cataclysmic. It probably stays conventional, and there's no reason that a nuclear power would get drawn in. No use of the lose massa. And 20, when use of the Western Foundation provide a rational incentive early. The new leadership was suffered disarmament, surrender, diplomacy, conventional, non-nuclear attack, flush subs, bombers, non-activate missile commission, the threats of challenge, the obvious response. Now go to the FERC advantage. The 2AC was just utter cowardice. 2AC1 was cost benefit inevitable. 1, they said that cost benefit would collapse. The 1AC explicitly conceded that they would cause participatory democracy. And the alternative would be the reversal of that. 1AC class is about a democratic model that spills over to broader decision making and holds decision making quote accountable. Lander says that participatory governance is the solution to quote democracy in crisis. Then configures quote global governance. We strategically conceded all of those. So that's 100%, and they procedurally cannot make a conflicting argument. No takebacks, or else it causes intellectual slog and destroys ground. Second, it's irrelevant for our offense, even if the plan is limited to the U.S. democracy. That makes war more likely in civil strife within the United States, which means that the U.S. would go on adventurous wars. Other global powers like China and India are already backsliding. So at best, this is partial defense for us. Third, the U.S. is the keystone for all democracy. Dominant 19, every regime democracy defense extra threat. The wind blowing to not face also maybe U.S. does not reclaim its place in case of democracy. Punishing and reminder autarchies, the reports of the democracy from the 2000 was physical leaders. China data research in Washington. Ask yourself how they solve for every list of existential threats in the 1AC, if not spilling over to broader democratic governance. The 1A will not have an answer because it was just cowardice. 4, authoritarianism is an inflection point. Only a reversal by a U.S. model. Prohibition 19, American leadership is central democracy. The return is a no constant achieve U.S. led. The greater the democratic trend is realistic campaign to destroy democracy. The leadership includes judicial independence, become near an inflection point, reliable U.S. turn back and America. Lasting gains. The first argument is that democracy is good, inevitable. 1 does not say inevitable and does not assume the case, but this card is from an editor-in-chief. The 1AC evidence says that democracies cause war, not peace, based on stats. The only robust study shows democracies increase conflict. Countries are more likely to attack than autocrats. The appearance of democratic peace does not control or go unobserved endogenous barriers. Flip the equation, which is 1AC Chiba. This is true in all scenarios. Chiba. And then 20, the unavailable and all the replicated democracy peace wants to be correct. No longer strong conclusion, negative coefficient, all agree democracy now. You can call it even against democratic effects of systemic whether you forget. And endogeneity makes a significant difference. Failure to co-generate. Limited variable by conclude the democracy. Pacify conflict. It's an empirical question answered by statistical models. Failures are code based on exhaustion, variables, tropes. All of their evidence, Chiba 20, with this not pursuit of acidotic child fighting. And then issue regime, related regime, unrelated war. And the plague research demonstrated unlike the spill over the fertility variation is agnostic. And that card is digital authoritarianism. This card says, quote, it could be corrupted, not that it would, but if it is corrupted, information warfare is good because it causes crackdowns, no warming and pandemics. Card after that just says that it could cause miscalculation, no intent, no, there's no reason that if we win the above that says autocracies are less likely to war, then this is wholly irrelevant, but democracies are just as likely to use that information because the U.S. also uses this information. The next argument is that China is worse. 1 is that authoritarianism is broadly feels, and it is not China lead, but broadly that the U.S. will no longer be a democracy. They have no evidence that says that China will become a global leader, and they don't have an impact of this, so this is irrelevant. The next few arguments are just all analytic. Audience authoritarians go rogue because no audience calls. I would do specific debating about disease. First, democracy makes disease control impossible. Autocracy saw pandemics require instant response to constant trace and quarantine. Democracies are lethargic, but authoritarians are swift. The difference is whether disease is contained in early stages or spread globally like virus. It's proven by China during COVID. They blocked down Wuhan and separated families. An unpopular move that worked. Their casualties were way lower than the U.S. with half of our population exercising their democratic freedom to refuse basic measures like that, which is out. Lockdowns must be absolutely brutal. Peter 21 democratic best and continue to see China was most acceptable to medical expertise to restore top-down mechanism. And part of really enforce decisions for lockdown separation of family. The effective result of high death the government the difference of non-democratic authority. Speed of response is key, which only authoritarians can do. Short and 12 crisis speed, disease leadership quickly and response to intelligence must be in compressed time for intelligence to make more. The democratic democracy above many levels of government, coordinating overlapping contested jurisdiction and the authoritarians and authority videos like the negotiation struggle media and the public are easily controlled. Democracies are unable to input effective measures in Walker and 20 democracy result in more dying from COVID because measuring political less widely non-intense models and more death because the system that waits influence pandemic control democracy in danger the well-being of the global community. Democracy locks in existential warming in the long one, which makes the absent turtling a drop in the bucket. 1 inaction. Deliberation is blocked by disagreement and special interest climate deniers. It's impossible to force painful cuts to missions that the public needs to sign off. Second response. Democracies have no infrastructure or organizational capacity to quickly shut down ecological shocks. The state must forcefully reallocate ration food and quarantine, or else they wouldn't survive, which is loot. 3, ideological freedom. Freedom to pollute and rights consume guarantee overshoot, which turns biodiversity loot. 20, trouble stage that extinct democracy and ecological, the security of individual pursue self-interest, understood authority, resulting in common rule, individualistic society, concept of rights, self-defined acts of freedom, problem, not requiring abandon. Ever, the Knoxville degradation, extinction of the solution, coercion, democracy, and not survive for society will be authority necessary governing structure. The common sure 4, capacity, deep mitigation will never have popular support in democracies. They have to be perfect across every country because of pollution. This transboundary loot 20 strategy need to be one popular implement democracy in this work. We found kind of to mitigate even the state mechanism. They're confined within border ill-suited democracy, not effective solving global problems. CO2, this doable passage only possible in government capability of relevant audience, but effectively possible in democratic setting. Then the survival. Democracy cannot solve the decades of inactions captured by oil lobbyists and gridlock. Prove that there's internal disagreement. Empirics demonstrate that theoretical possibility of democracy will never be realized. Next argument is that participatory democracy causes civil wars. 1, that's wrong. Democracy is way more likely to cause a spoon. And 11, during dimensions civil conflict, emergency, explode nationalism, create division, central governance, 2, democracy, and civil complicated, and commitment probably leads to difficulty trusting democratic rules, increased distrust, suspicion, risk, collapse, and weakening state authority, because sensitive security among minority groups, unpredictable, to resort to balance. Democracy does not constrain civil war, directly to 19 can evaluate imperfection civil war, civil wars are not like democracy, unpredictable danger, increasing its chance significantly, and type of set is not decisive economics, nor significant. There's no next argument is that it's a double turn of trade. 1, no, incorrect. Restrictions on war via trade are still possible, given the fact that the U.S., Russia, and China do not go to war because of trade disputes, which means that it is not a double turn with authoritarianism. They've not said that democracy is key to trade. So the one here does not get to say it's a double turn. The next argument is biodiversity impact. It is wrong. 200 years of history shows that species and humans will be able to adapt to inhospitable environments. Current data voids the 6th math extinction claims because most reductions are local and small-scale experiments, even if 90% losses would not be exceptional. Biodiversity is high more in 21 global. Bodies higher, not even history. Number 2 one family down. That increase faster, reduce no record entire taxonomy extinction. Not saying sex extinction, herd reduction, 100 extinction decline by 80% due to effort environmental political species extinction purposes based on a real fact that cannot be checked and supported by the vested interest. No impact to deforestation work. The 3 trillion tree fit like that each year take over 200 years. The force that disappeared is unlikely. The environment cannot be devoid of oxygen to survive for 4,000 years because oxygen ran empty, not considering climate protection. The blooms to the abundance of carbon increased oxygen trees caused by an increase in temperature. The other one you see impact that was dropped was truth decay. This also answers the digital misinfo card that the tweets read picker in 19. Aren't we going to post truth or no? The rhetorically published it. Always late leading Spanish American War, Civil War, Vietnam. And then our fake news is no longer history and abandoned. We copy and fake news. The minuscule proportion communication far less than 1% by the partisan imperfect persuasion hardly precisely less. You're already a right-wing favorite if you came across the opponent as you treat it. No impact to biody. Creven 18. Reduction in species version not. When to access service, there's little value to decline species. Every replace the local oven. This fortune to all species value have the oven. Mechanism for island solution to scenario biody loss not existential nation develop as they clean up air, water pollution, reasonable expect governments act before equal catastrophe.
Ready? You drew a few quotes from one EC evidence saying that the AF defends democracy. Let's go through each one. Which one was the first? Elander?
Yeah, spill over.
You said you drew a quote from this card. Democracy is in crisis. Where does this card say that?
The 1EC card.
Yeah, Elander, right?
Yeah, I think Elander was probably the best one for us. Yeah, Elander says, quote, in the middle, there are even signs that liberal democracy is in crisis, which was the line.
Even signs.
It's like the first half of the paragraph.
Is in crisis. Does it say that the affirmative?
Well, then the second line that was conceded from this is, it is now a question of how governance configurations globally choose to decide on the road forward. That seems to say that there's a pathway between democratic failure and democratic success. We have impact during success.
So we have explicitly made a tailored argument, like throughout the entirety of the 1AC, about why the app fixes participatory democracy. Why does it spill over to broad models of democracy abroad or fix authoritarianism?
We've read spillover link cards. Both Diamond and the sub-point 4 and the 2NC say that other countries are looking towards the U.S. because it's the sort of gold standard for what democracy ought to look like.
Okay. Why are they becoming authoritarian then?
Well, because backsliding is happening now.
Say more about that.
Your uniqueness argument says that democracy is collapsing now and is in crisis because there's not governance solutions via participatory democracy. Absent the plan, that democracy would collapse.
So
and cause
this
more
is
authoritarianism.
spin, not based in evidence. I want to ask very concretely, what is making these countries that you're referring to backslide?
Well, a variety of reasons. I mean, like,
Is it just a plan?
well, no, it's actually not the point. Your argument is that they're
So
backsliding
wait,
now.
what are the other reasons they're outside the plan?
Well, I think that's sort of irrelevant. You said that you would stop democracy from succeeding. We read link cards that say that countries could be itching to look towards China and Russia for forms of governance. The plan would reverse that by making the U.S. look like a gold standard of democracy.
Okay, which other quotes have you drawn from the 1AC to demonstrate that the app
I mean,
literally
honestly,
saves
after
the
I read that
world
line,
from
I think that one's
democracy?
probably the best. The card above that says that it's the best way to check politicians and interest groups and get rid of lobbying, which a lot of our cards, the public goods thing, says that that's one of the biggest issues with democracy. Resolving that probably makes democracy look really good, given like oil lobbies wouldn't exist and like the people that backlash against pandemics.
What is the bar to solve your impacts? Is it countries around the globe need to become autocratic, and how many?
It's probably the more authoritarians, the better.
Okay, so what does authoritarian mean in this context? Is it like a restructuring of the entire constitution of various governments?
I mean, it can be a variety of things. It's obviously linear. It could be like strict dictatorship. It could be like they pass more authoritarian measures, such as lockdown measures during time of pandemics, or they crack down on fossil fuel companies instead of like allowing capitalist flourishing, etc.
Okay, very strange. So, what?
Also, wait, the other thing that's important is that we've read internal link terms to the different things you
Yeah,
said.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
democracy
I got
for.
you.
So, like, even if you say no link, like we have internal link terms and stuff.
Well, they need to be unique to be terms.
I'm sending it. It's orders the T adopt and then the trade decide.
Say that again?
T adopt and then the trade decide. Did everyone get it?
Hold on. Scanning for viruses.
Do people have it now?
Yeah.
Everyone's good? Okay. First, as we meet, they don't meet. They say that the planet's agencies, if they do meet, then they link the trade USFG violates Chicago 13 government's adopting 113 or whatever referred to use federal government government, which is but is that actually the name of the government. The requires specification billings. 85 these orders specificity. Next is a counter interpretation. Adopting a policy speaking congressional statute agency actions are topical for when it's limits important agencies is what the topic topical. Cases could rule on any constitutional ground, canon, precedent, test case, or jurisprudence to generate more specific advantages and mechanisms tweaking existential precedent and the fringes, or they modify any EPC environmental rule, enforce existing statutes or issue guidance both are multiplied by the structure of subnational actors from every edition into circuit court and the section of authority like SEC, EP, FDA, and even specific ones like the Office of Policy Irradiation. Congressional action limits the topic to statute reform, which is substantially more researchable. Limits outweigh the agent is only constrained to decolonization, MBI, or meaningless. Expanding the topic overstretches research, creates prop asymmetries that favor the app, and pushes that ground on educational extreme. 2 is ground course, and agencies skirt a fundamental change to the trade of debate. This app can skirt generic and political process and pick the most defensible agent for climate action and inherent political backlash is the most significant reason that climate action is sold to politics or trading. And writers and coordinate generics plan in June and X office and EPA flies under the radar and moves. And often they say functional limits, they fail. Their interpretation removes them. Industry D is actually they say the agent counterplans. It's a non-starter. 1 is good. It's the best functional limit on the topic. 2 best policy, excluding questions of technical design, rules, implementation. Shook. DC, God of the devil, the details, and the portrait of racialist, and significant that affect the rule of the conflict. It's the second the policy of the topic is Congress, Congress not appreciate the detail of implementation of rule of a goal. It was a desert is not a statute instead. Ensure that we're checked out, and that's uniquely true for climate policy. Individual policy design and program and analysis of the network and being just really loose for energy policy discourse dominated by over simplification. Notion of policy would be good while asking over practical nuance that makes the difference. Research and provides ammunition that enables and digital policy design is the only thing that matters. It's fair. Any large advantage has intrinsic deficits, switching the agent can solve process questions, theory checks, aptitudes, and judges would correct outwards. They say the functional limits functional material. Their interpretation removes them. Industry days and political pressures, radical statutory changes, not tweaks. There's no other constraints that can specify any subset, and the bar is low since they can't fit a prep and find unique impact terms good for one cases. Can't be fact checked, will be generics, even if not, they crush research and turn debate into anti-educational extremes. They say normal means DA, they don't solve proliferation of executive acts like aviation, tariffs, and exports. Proves that in teams read those in reasonability is arbitrary. It causes judge intervention. It kills fairness. They're not reasonable. They wreck the topic. And a combination of all reasonable cases exposes limits. Competing interpretations causes race to top by encouraging best practice. DA. Trade shocks outweigh magnitude, collapse of trade removes economic constraints on military aggression, causing shooting wars, the trigger World War III hotspots like Korea, Taiwan, and IC trigger populist pressures, guarantees escalation, externally globalization and collapses, the co-op necessary to maintain inevitable shocks from prolific disease that causing that's Oppenheimer breakdown, escalates civil conflict to the drawn Iran, Russia, and North Korea nuclear war camp. 20. If interdependent peace and operating measures against the internal conflicts, escalating global wars and civil wars, if eliminatory migration, reconnect conflicts to chart, modelers including U.S. or Russia conflicts for conflagration, wars quickly, spiral economic problems with war to countries, wars or war become possible when vertical to fall the chins of the U.S. official war nuclear confrontation, high Korean war, nuclear creates menace, and get put together World War III proxy the international conflict with deterrence declining. Endure wars return. First argument is no link. That's wrong. The plan is frustrated for CBA domestic climate policy to induce economic and political fears of lost competitiveness, unemployment, and reduced tax bases. Carbon tax would be a way out of the dilemma that policymakers would add to preserve domestic gains. That's the Quaestor. Evidence the link turns more warrants. One, pressure. It's a political necessity for the passage of any climate policy. Chapter 20. In terms of climate policy, could at least the several post-climate regs would have come to government president is carbon tariff is politically necessary to majority support of any economic change reg 2. Biden his approach on emission reduction will include even and so 23 British novel proposals when have even the signals probably because when linked to consideration and response to current popularity from measures to upstate this even the Biden consideration being part of the reducing emission with their evidence sample but they include some form of CBAM to affect the support of some responsibility because the UCBAM role 3 is legislative reaction, climate and trade war inherently intertwined. Missile 24. CBAM increasing the ahead of the election expiration taxes, potential CBAM services vital after anticipating the science, the critical juncture where implementation of CBAM mentioning nation climate policy, trade policy, that's relative to proposals to lawmakers consider the achievement of trade, including policy to achieve overarching good production economy, business and fair competition, trade for integration in certain burden. The 21 policy we integrate with the trade for the equation, including carbon tariffs, climate policy to gain attraction to get to market wages, comprehensive legislation with less than previously draw in is the challenge making policies durable. And they say the plan sustained exports doesn't prove they maintain global trade, but just one type of commodity. They cannot cross-apply the intrinsic test because it wasn't made on this DA, but reject them. It ruins that ground on a topic which has a tiny ass and rejects politics, teaching us about the political process. China trade war thumps was a blip. The 1 year will be new, so rejected trade is strong. Global trends are up. The largest indicators added trillions and overwhelmed small policy tapering. That's even CTDA, the global authoritative source on trade. Every indicator restoring. FASA 816. Trade critical welfare, efficient trade welfare, FTA underscore consensus on trade with the global trade essential work more attention than paid to reducing red tape and inclusive and trade necessity over extended period. The global trade administrative a great rate of 3.5% space, 5.5 volume and then forecast remain recently volumes grow by 2.6% and 24 and 3.3% and 25 the OECD anticipate uptick in the flows. Next is the LNG export pause. 1, it thumps the app as well because it should have caused energy wars. Second is they said that those were reversed in course, so the political pressure didn't kick in and all of our links post in its price in and those were not carbon pricing, which means our link evidence does not apply. 3 is recency, new data, legislation paves the past. Domain 24, bipartisan constitutional legislation moving away from carbon tariffs. It's a major victory for lawmakers data use in the future can justify new trade policy. 4 is bipartisanship. Broker 24, both in Congress floated as CCAA aims to give domestic companies set up with the global marketplace FFP leverage the emission reduction profile of the U.S. relative foreign competitors and weaken control supply chain structure. Would determine the benchmarks. Next is that it was not attached. What the fuck isn't a warrant? The link was explained above. They say there's no impact. They just asserted no impact in World War I. This is also not a warrant. Next is that Trump tariffs up. 1, strike down. Tariffs don't make it through Congress or get struck down in the court. Element 10. Trump would need Congress requires the event and I would Trump doesn't have the authority to double all in court. 2, it's just a bargaining tactic. Tausch, element 8. Lights are a long time measure. We're definitely having any Trump symbols that signal more academic court trouble than consequences until he was the deal maker. He use the tariffs to meet this and to view that too politically toxic adolescent 11 single place politically toxic. The impact of his policy proposals would make Trump has state market. Trump has a CBAM ends globalization import calculations cause prices sources uncertainty lead to bifurcated economy and runs afoul of WTO rules, increases distrust under Paris create climate blocks, erodes trade rules, and is discriminatory under the WTO. Sorry, I'll send those extra cards that I forgot to send.
Thanks.
It was sent.
He's recencying these Bible cards.
Yeah.
Okay, starting
clarify, did you read the Tosh card, the second bargain tactic card? For, under compare?
Under the link?
No, under AT Trump.
Yeah, I read both of the ones I just sent.
Did you read the ones in the doc?
Yeah, she got Tosh.
Oh, okay. There's two separate docs, sorry. Has everyone gotten both documents? No? Okay.
Send 1AR and 1AR helper.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which is first?
I'm gonna give an order and that will clarify. So it's the Europe Advantage. It is the FERC Advantage. It is the, and at the bottom is like the, obviously the marks and stuff. Topicality. Then,
Your advantage is the one that doesn't have the impact. First.
yeah.
Wait, sorry, which one was first?
The Europe Advantage is first. Energy crisis is existential conflict over energy are the reason that temperature escalation of older saboteurs and other theaters like Taiwan, Korea, and the Arctic. That's the scenario is not European proletariat energy tensions. Europe caused broader conflict. Ukraine is not dumb. It's a great argument for us. The only reason they did not have an energy crisis because we filled in that because it's flexible, but they're willing to forego that in the smoke because they think renewables fill in now, but they couldn't. Then first card is about using nukes in the West. Our scenario is not first strike. It's escalate to de-escalate. Second card does not have a word until so about first strike. And McKinnon is hilarious. Russia did not nuke Poland. None other defense is applicable. It's broadly about Russian war, but does not assume the catalyst is an energy crisis, which uniquely boldest them to escalate because they see Europe and NATO are fragile. Use or lose. Defense obviously goes out because we're saying escalate to de-escalate. The CBA advantage. The app is key to aligning US with international climate closed. That's so we solve warming better. They did not contest the internal link with the democracy. That impact proper Michigan is best. democracy more transparent, but it does not save the U.S. from literally collapsing into it. They say we cause cost-benefit states to collapse. That's wrong. We said that the cost-benefit state is inevitable. Lander does not say democracy is in crisis. We said that participatory governments will not be effective, not that democracy is going to collapse. So there's no link to this term in Michigan. It's grasping at straws that the right that democracy is going to collapse, and it proves the app now. Save it, or it's sustainable good. Collage 21. Pause timer. My dot was frozen.
Yeah. Okay.
Alright, can you pull it up, please?
Yeah.
I have like the first part of the card, so we'll start.
Okay.
The lure of liberal protest against the populist and defeated the U.S. maintained as the leader of liberal coalition to deter Russian and Chinese have been addressed the responsibility of taking over all human expect humanities to turn solely feasible the third democratic world compromise will be master assured nuclear confrontation. The U.S. key is not good enough. They need a card saying that fixing the cost benefit states is modeled globally to prevent the entire liberal order from collapsing. They have not read that card. The plan is not key. Trump, bumps Aragon, and a bunch of populist fraud failed by digital authoritarianism, terrible miss. Infocast global work have not 18 truth kids, emphatic invitation, like truth another fair crime. The U.S. is going to political economic relation, never seen much the U.S. improvement escalation to truth can increase. Alternative risk on potential escalation, possibly improve truth can watch out for statement. Policy and domestic international implication. Democracy is key to solve war. Authoritarians are more likely to go to war. One appear with Russia and China war warplanes to Ukraine, Russia. That's cost and second is theory. Authoritarians do not feel obvious cost makes them less effective to seize. Relies on being in tune with stakeholders and the plan solves the better, makes cost benefits seek better, ensures the disease response is more to stakeholders. Also cross-play a card on the campaign about vaccines, which means we have a better internal link to it. And group warming, biodiversity turns strong. All our evidence is script authoritarianism theory, not climate hating freaks like Putin or Bolsonaro. But I extended the reason that we solve it better above. T. Counter-interpretation, adopt, comply, HCs, that includes HCs, policy includes not body foreign action. Both are two EC cards, picks are unbeatable, continue pick that, stop translating because this debate is not reflective of the total model they obliterate. Apps, agent counterplay, uniquely threatening your agent keywords, your app on the shop in particular, price counterplay, states counterplay are unbeatable, price and keys impossible to come by arbitrariness from the other. Key page for some reason, functional limits, HCs are not meaningfully different because they don't make the same changes to the energy mix, states counterplay, campaign, others. You don't need agent disad, not the best policy. The core of the topic is climate policy and the energy topic means you do get disad. You should try and change the energy mix instead of whining about agent dissets, extend reasonability, voting for it, motivates teams to go for theory instead of substance, which obviates policy education. If we have a sufficiently good interpretation of the topic, you should not punish us with a death penalty. You cannot predict the best imperfect anti-judge intervention is inevitable and good. You should please bad arguments in case they made a cross application from any of the theory things obviously rejected, and they were not reasons to reject the team, and the two ECs were not reasons to go negative. A trade dissent. Why we obviously solve the impact better, that was above, and continue civil wars, which is the internal link they have to solving regional conflicts, which means that they don't have an internal link, but we do, and energy crisis is the best one, that was above on escalate to de-escalate. Also, there's obviously no turns case, the app happens first, and they've read defense to their own internal link. The first argument is no link. First, the plan is only limited to the LNG exports and permits that was on T subsets, so we get subsets, which means it's not economy-wide, it does not impact all of trade, and so the effect is insulated. Second is that a CBAM is absolutely not attached. Yes, this has a warrant, which is that you don't have one in the first place, and once he does not have a line that says that a CBAM would get attached to a plan, it doesn't even have a line that a CBAM would get attached to a carbon tax, which they've conceded that we are a subset of, so it does not get attached to the plan. Third is I'll answer their cards, no rollback, no rollback because this card assumes that it gets attached. Pressure is wrong, and the plan is perceived as good for trade, not climate policy, because LNG is good for exports, and the Biden subpoint is silly. We're not about emissions reductions. All of their cards assume that the plan is a vanilla carbon tax, and legislative reaction is wrong because the plan is not seen as a climate policy. It's obviously perceived as an energy policy, but this card is about a broad carbon tax at best, which we obviously are not. The export pause is not the app, but it does something disad because we're saying that some degree of LNG exports are good. That's the point of the first advantage. We think that green LNG is good and not green LNG is bad, so the export pause stopped all LNG, so it does not stop the app, but it also happened for only 2 months, which means that it did not cause anything, and they've said it's priced in. That's obviously wrong, but it does stop the disad because it stopped non-green LNG. The Trump stuff, yes, he thumps it. Their first card is so silly. It does not have a warrant in it. It says that the Senate will not approve it, but obviously they will because he has a Republican majority. And second evidence is that it was all campaign hype. That's obviously also wrong because they also conceded the 2 EC card that says he'll definitely do it, but I'll read more cards. It's 11-8 re-election of companies under deglobalization globally analyzed by economists. Wells Fargo had terrorists, unilateral trade driver, the country ran economic analysis, new terrorist outbreak, economic fracture caught by COVID. The U.S. incoming war and salute new terrorists may push more countries toward trying to reshape global trade, and Trump will start a trade war. Life in 24, Trump president characterized in an after the trade strike attempt to meet WTO, unilateral impose tariffs, Trump will increase here 200% defending trade powers, retaliate, leave us dire by neighbor trade policy in 30s, and even beyond Trump, free trade is politically toxic. Harold, in 24 by 2015, he loses express anticism, TPP punish, trade initiatives collided politically controversial initiatives and unions want to appropriately post-station trade talks with the UK and Kenya. Mark that part of Kenya, just in case, though. ASPEC, one, it's arbitrary residence, USFG, second, is cross-section expert disad, and third, agent counterparts are cheating.
And
Yeah.
new apps are good.
New apps are also good,
To app
and it
innovation.
was not a reason to reject team for app innovation.
How do we work at it?
I thought it was.
Did any of
You have 7 minutes.
Okay. Sorry. You try that. T?
Yeah.
What's up?
It is try or die for a limited topic. A post-Trump topic has made it guerrilla warfare, where teams break one and done small agency apps at the fringes. Their offense will die by death by 1,000 cuts, but the 1 error lacked in addressing 1 error granularity, why agencies are uniquely bad, and the 1 error lacked impact calculus, and why AFGROUND should come first. The only benefit that we gain from the activity is research and education, because the only terminal benefit from activity 1 is limits. Agency apps allow apps at the fringes, modifying singular environmental rules like MSUs, liability after enforcing existing statutes like VCMs, issuing guidance because they've set policies, don't have to be binding in, which is there to interpret that allows any agency rule modification. This is exponentially multiplied by every subdivision that exists under the executive. The SEC climate rules app, the EP Office of Air and Radiation, or just the EP Office, the policy app, or the SEC, or the FERC internal decision-making app that moderately changes. The tweaks each agency is divided by individuals with more subs. The sets of agencies which expose the topic. They've individually conceded that our interpretation solves this congressional action is unifying and mandates statutory reform, which the way more scalable and breathable topic because it must change the law inside of the CA or the CW. Limits must outweigh decarbonization is meaningless in MBI. This broadly meaningless unless any different mechanism, and we conceded their definition of subsets, which is solve their offense because we said it was necessary for app flex. Absent that, it creates the prep asymmetries, which means that we always lose. First argument is picks bad. 1, strike this off here that we explicitly conceded that picks were not theoretically legitimate, which means that they should not be allowed under any model A. Second, strike this because it was new. The Tweety justification was that Asian counterplans that were bad, not that picks were bad. And we also conceded you don't get picks out of subsets because your interpretation would solve that, which means that this basically is just Asian counterplans bad, but they've conceded a plethora of things. 1, the course counterplan is good. That is the only functional limit on the topic when the apps are broken at the margins. Shucks, 2 is education. Shucks says the devils are in the detail. The key to learn why policies and how they're enacted is based on agent and the granularity that happens in between them. Education is the only permanent the benefit for the activity which turns any fairness impact that the 2 must go for. This is especially true in the context of climate policy because the climate policy because nuances over what agents should enact the policy, what is most predictable for businesses, and then how that changes business behavior and legal behavior. The research is good, which is the second one in our card. The one in our card. The one in our card. Our offense also outweighs, which would be non-functional limits. Next argument is that pricing and states are unbeatable. 1, you get intrinsic deficits in the agent counterplans based on statutory keys, certainty key, and then conservative court action bad, which solves your process arguments. Theory also checks conceded because if the court's counterplan was so overpowered, judges would overcorrect and apps would be built to beat them and would start going for court's counterplans bad. Which would autocorrect because it is the self-correcting. Pricing and states are beatable. Deficits are low-hanging fruit. Preemption is more likely because there's a conservative court in the case. And the pricing key is a joke. There are multiple different types of pricing masters. The SEC, if you think this is new, it's because the 1 AR was new, so we get new answers. But independently, they conceded that this low-hanging fruit because it is low-hanging fruit to find deficits. To all of these, the next argument is that we don't need agent DAs. 1, they've conceded the Tweety ground offense. Inherency and political backlash is the main reason that climate policy is stalled and in action now. It is not because of small business costs like LNG, but it is because the political backlash from things like lobbying. But X office is the EP of flies under the radar, moots all of that, which means that it's necessary for us to get things like horse trading, congressional politics. Independently, they conceded that industry and economy links are based on statutory change, which is how businesses decide to make changes, and wholesale changes in climate policy, which cause changes in business calculations. Small tweaks to how the EPA or FERC acts do not reach the same threshold, which means that there's no link uniqueness for any of the resource Ds that the 1 AR cited. The next argument is that there is a mix of energy Ds. All of these are just impact turns to energy, but the stuff above means that app specificity will always win, and a topic that's just energy, good, bad, this horrible, so it does not solve our education offense. And we have an external reason that is way worse for neg fairness. The next argument is the list of the cap K. It's being by the permutation. It's not applicable to every F and small apps, such as changing small inherent rules are not so inherently capitalist, and so it does not entrench the system. So it does not resolve our offense, and it definitely does not resolve their education offense. The next argument is the functional limit. 1, conceded that there's no other constraint because you can specify any subset, and the bar is low because you get infinite prep to get unique links to every negative argument. Second, this good for 1 cases cannot be fact checked, which means that apps will always be generics and then throw them out. And then empirics prove this, even if not, they are interpretation crushers research, which means that it must come first. The last argument was reasonability. Reject reasonability. Reject reasonability, competing in terms is best. Judge intervention is bad. Quote, policing bad arguments isn't a role for a fair educator. It ruins fairness because judges assert their own opinions in debate. If this was true, every debate would just be done after the 1AC and the 1AC because there's no logical limiting principle of what arguments are bad enough, and judges would evaluate them unfairly because everyone has a different view of what is reasonable. Competing interpretations is objective, which leaves the debate in the debater's hands. It's a key to participation in the activity. Rewarding, avoiding arbitrary interpretations. That outweighs fairness comes first. Everything in debate relies on it, and Northwestern relies on it too. It's accidentally good, which was above. Competing competing interpretations maximizes education by encouraging the best practice. It turns the substance crowd out under their interpretation. Neg teams are forced to rely on generic case and process calculates leading to debaters about framework and competition. T encourages the best practice, leaving maximum amounts of debate about the topic since negative teams will be prepared. And then case next lastly is reasonability might solve neg fairness offense, but not a research that are research about research via the course calculate and legalese processes are good because we said that those debates are uniquely good to have which their interpretation would exclude. They dropped that it's not reasonable because all the limits and ground explanation above reasonability requires them to beat the substance to prove it's reasonable, which was the integral of.
Say reasonability, T is substance because legal education.
T is substance because legal education, which was impacted out on the climate policy and agent discussions, good stuff under the research thing.
All right. We have 3 minutes.
out string of stabbings across Manhattan on Monday to like 2 people. I live there, man. Yeah. What's happening? Not really understand.
I'm gonna stop counting. Is anyone not good? clearly don't understand what Michigan is doing. You should vote out because our interpretation is reasonable. They lead to picks which are not central to the topic on a matter of climate change and energy policy. Their interpretation is arbitrary and unpredictable because it's been completely manufactured, and there's no reason why the affirmative has to defend a particular agent. And we have more than sufficient defense to their arguments because normal means that affirmative teams have to defend particular agents like the executive or the judiciary, and you get agent-based DAs, and there are functional limits like states, etc., that make sure that negative teams can stay in the game. Our interpretation is that adopt implies agency action, and that includes agency action, and that policy is agent agnostic. Those are the two easy cards that we read about this question. I'm going to extend reasonability to the top because it's a central question for how you should evaluate the debate. Voting negative in this round in particular motivates teams to go for theory instead of substance, which obviates policy education and legal education, which is the only two in our argument that is sufficiently impacted. If we have a sufficiently good interpretation of the topic and that is sufficiently debatable, you should not punish us with the death penalty. We cannot predict the best interpretation of the topic ex ante. Now, topicality is special. It's different from other arguments because it is the death penalty. These shitty debates are different from rich educational debates about LNG or the fuel mix or the political process more broadly, which means you should do whatever you can to avoid doling out the death penalty to affirmative teams that are trying their best to genuinely engage the topic. They say judge intervention is inevitable. No, it is not. You can evaluate substantive debates using a technique, and you can look at the evidence and use your gut to evaluate topicality debates. Judges should be able to judge for the purposes of preserving good, rich debates, and also you should use your gut to ensure that you are preserving a good vision of debate, because their primary role as an adjudicator is to ensure that debate is educational and we are not crowding out good debates. They say that we aren't reasonable. Yes, we are. Our entire interpretation is centered on the point. It's centered on the most genuine, plain meaning reading of the resolution. We are just making an argument that the United States federal government is that. The United States federal government is not tied to a particular agent, and defense to their standards below will prove that we are reasonable. They say topicality is substance. No, it is not. Their argument is just contrivance. It is not legal education. Think about the kind of debates you want to judge. Do you want to learn about something new about the climate topic, or do you want to hash out whether A-spec is good or bad for a couple of hours? Likely the former, not the latter. This is impact calculus for how you should evaluate all of their arguments, because you should deprioritize negative concerns in favor of including the affirmative in the face of arbitrary and unpredictable topicality violations. Now, being AF matters on this. You should care more about affirmative ground on this topic in particular. States is unbeatable because all of the preemption deficits are completely and totally made up because fiat overcomes any leadership or other deficits, which means that you need to do your best to keep the affirmative in the game. And politics is clearly a good net benefit, which means their post-election rate does not make any sense. The pricing pick is also unbeatable because it's actually deviously hard to find a pricing keyword for a number of different affirmatives on the topic, like their BCM app that basically lost to the Rice counterplan. Now, there are two central pieces of offense for the debate. One, agent counterplans are completely unbeatable. It is the climate topic, and nobody has the time, the effort, and there aren't any agent keywords that exist at all, because when people are advocating for market-based instruments, their central concern is about whether or not we should take a command and control or a regulatory approach versus a market-based approach to climate concerns. Nobody is writing about the key problem that the negative is asking you to query about, which is which agent should enforce it. Conceding picks bad does not translate to every debate, because this debate is not reflective of a total model. Our argument when we said picks bad in the 2AC was the pick that they deployed in this particular instance was a bad thing, but that is not reflective of teams going for picks bad in literally every debate, which means that you can envision a world in which Michigan goes into the next debate, reads a pick, and they don't lose on said pick. So agent counterplans clearly do dominate under our interpretation of the topic, and they don't automatically lose on theory. You should err affirmative on this topic in particular because the pricing pick in the state's counterplan unbeatable, which is proven above. The court's counterplan is not good or educational. It's sophistry on an energy topic, because the core concern on a climate topic is not necessarily on an energy topic and a climate topic that has the words market-based instrument in the resolution is whether or not we should take a market-based approach or a regulatory approach to the climate crisis. Now, arbitrariness, you should cross-apply it. We cross-applied it from the other topicality page, which means that it is a logical cross-application. There is no reason whatsoever why the resolution requires a particular agent. The resolution says United States federal government. It does not contain any element. It does not contain any element that requires it to be Congress. We read a piece of evidence in the 2EC that says that you can adopt rules as well, which versus their interpretation does not neatly draft onto the resolution because it is arbitrary and because it is unpredictable. We could not anticipate it ex ante, so the next time that we read an affirmative, if we defend Congress, another team could say that adopt exclusively means the adoption of rules and that it is only the courts, etc. So we would auto lose in that instance. Affirmative ground should be priority because we automatically lose with the pricing pick in the state's counterplan approved above. Now, we have sufficient defense to all of their standards. One, normal means you do get DAs. You should try and read DAs about the energy mix instead of talking about agent DAs. That is sufficient to solve all their policy education arguments, because you still get DAs about executive action and you still get DAs about the courts and also Congress if you you can tie an affirmative team to defending a statute. 2, functional limits. The link to the core offense on this topic is not about the agent, it is about the energy mix. The LNG DA, the oil DA, and the coal DA are predominantly about what approach we should take to the climate crisis, not about who should tackle the climate crisis. That means that there is no meaningful difference between the court's affirmative or the executive out for the purposes of the LNG DA or for the purposes of any of their offensive arguments. Now, the state's counterplan does impose a meaningful limit on the topic because every affirmative needs to have a Fed key warrant. Carbon tax has been sorely lacking for a Fed key warrant throughout the debate, throughout the season, and teams have just been cowardly to go for it, but it will make a comeback, especially post-election. The fuel mix DAs are very hard to beat, and every affirmative that is cut needs to find a meaningful response to it, etc. They say GFOs and constraints non-unique are offense that is also applicable under their model, which proves that the negative is probably terminally host, as maybe terminally host as well. You should do whatever you can to preserve affirmative ground, especially in the face of arbitrary and unpredictable topicality violations.
Neg doc was sent.
Afterwards, or just the ones that we see, I can send it.
Yeah.
That's fine.
Okay.
could be doing it either way.
Illinois, Kansas.
What they said making its deviation. Were they making its
They were making its Kansas.
deal with the chain or was it on
Right, three dots. I can just look at that.
That would be okay.
came to making it the quarters of the Shirley. The decision is a 5-0 for the negative for Michigan. I guess I'll go first because I took the longest. I mean, I thought this debate was pretty close. I came pretty close to pulling the trigger on reasonability and arbitrariness in tandem because I don't really think the 2NR has a terrific answer to this arbitrariness argument that is in the 1AR and extended in the 2AR. I ultimately decided not to just because I think the magnitude of offense for the neg on both limits and ground is very large. The thing that was most important for me is this 2NR argument that says that like all disad ground is based off of large change to statutory law surrounding energy policy, which the apps interpretation excludes by just like allowing agency apps with like a pretty small magnitude of change. I think this means that just like agency apps could be written to be very small and avoid just like, and create tiny changes to just like the fuel mix, which is like this big 2AR push. And I think that's mostly uncontested in the 2AR. The 2AR's like push is that the debate should be about whether or not climate policy is like a good idea rather than just like about the actor, which I don't think really responds to this pretty explicit argument that just like agencies are not paying, or companies are not paying super close attention to agencies, but do base like long-term decisions around just like statutes. I think there's also just like a big just like limits disad to just like including a bunch of agency apps with like a very small amount of change that obviously the Fed key warrant and like there's not really any counterclaim that's able to solve. Which means that if I agree with the 2AR that just like I should protect substance, like I should prioritize debates about climate policy or the effect that climate policy has on the economy over just like debates about actors, that I pretty conclusively air neg because I think that their interpretation mandates just like a pretty large degree of change and locks in a lot of mid grounds. Thought a lot about arbitrariness and almost voted app on it. Like I intuitively believe it's true because I don't think there's a ton of work there done in the 2AR and especially not the 1AR. But I don't think the 2NR really has an excellent, like I don't really think the 2NR says anything about arbitrariness at all, which like I came pretty close to voting on. But I also don't think it's really developed in the 1AR beyond an argument that it's just like agencies are not meaningfully different from congressional action or whatever. And the 2AR just like doesn't really say anything about it beyond just like repeating a couple of times that like the plainest meaning of the resolution is like actor agnostic. I think if the 2AR has a lot of evidence comparison, that is like your evidence is like from the APA, it seems like a very predictable interpretation of the docs. Their evidence seems a lot more arbitrary. I think I would be pretty persuaded to potentially vote out on that. Reasonability, I just ended up neg with just because I think that like the magnitude of offense is pretty large. Like broadly sympathetic to the 2AR that like substance crowd out is true. But I think the neg is also just like winning big internal link to substance crowd out based on the 2NR winning this thing about how their topic or your interpretation of the topic allows for just like small apps that don't have a large direction of change. So that was enough for me to ultimately conclude that neg offense was just big enough to outweigh.
I guess we can go down the line. Top level, I generally agree. I will like try to identify some differences in what I maybe found more persuasive. First, I think I was less close on reasonability. My problem with the 2AR is you don't have a great justification of why statutes is key. I think the crucial interpretation they have was like the statutory effect. And even pointing out like your adopt card is about it not being binding. And I just think that a lot of the 2NR, the limits debate, I'm very persuaded by about how there is an unlimited amount of non-statutory actions that allow agencies to do really small changes, which explodes the topic and provides a huge neg burden, which allows us to have, first of all, like less debating on the topic, core arguments, and secondly, the less like technical education. You know, they have decent cards about topic education and like the technical details and policies being mattering. So they're kind of ahead in like establishing a DA that you all also are not like having the great evidence too. So I think the 2AR needs to focus less on this like USFG broad thing and like really debate more about the statutes in my personal opinion. The arbitrary argument, I'm not gonna lie, my flow, I don't have the 1AR saying these things. I think that the 2AR is pretty new. Like I could be persuaded that in any debate someone could read a definition of like who the actor is, and that makes it really hard to be apt. But I just feel like the 1AR for me might be part of the problem personally, is I think it was like really quick and like light on some of this offense. I don't think you have a lot of offense coming out of the 1AR, and I think the limit, like the limits debate specifically, as I mentioned, I think I'm pretty persuaded by. I think your best answer is the functional limits argument, but the 2NR has more nuance on limits. They talk about like the links don't work, they're not unique, the apps are small. Like the CapK, the perm, like better research apps means they be generics. Like they just have a lot of cuts against your arguments that kind of add up to me and why I'm more persuaded by their offense, if that makes sense. And then with the other neg DA about details being good, blah, 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 that was already really covered. So I just think they have more offense about why I should work statutes and why, clarifying Congress is necessary for debating on this topic. Generally, otherwise the topic will become unbearable for everybody. So reasonability, that kind of frames why I feel like the app isn't reasonable. I don't think you meet their interpretation. I don't think you try to meet it either, which also confuses me. And them being ahead on limits makes me persuaded by you being unreasonable. And I don't know, it gets tough. Like obviously y'all have both really good arguments going back and forth on reasonability. I just think counter interpretation, I prefer to allow us to have like these more debates on the topic. Yeah, I think like for me, it's like getting some coherence between the 1AR and the 2AR would help, and focusing on different arguments, like maybe less about the climate being the core of the topic and less about the energy mix, and then just like more justification of your interpretations you read in the 2AC and why that's better. Or maybe more focus on why you meet their interp, which I don't know if you do. You might have at some point said you did.
Yeah, I think my decisions are not fundamentally different. I think the neg has some substantial limits in ground offense. I was relatively persuaded by the sort of devils in the details arguments. Like I thought that was a relatively clear theme of both the 1NR and the 2NR that we should have agent counterpoints basically. Like we should be talking about the difference between the course of Congress. We should have course trading DAs based on congressional debates and so on. That felt like important offense to me for reasons I'll get to in a bit. Main half defense is functional limits. This is mostly just manifested in the form of like listing arguments the negative can read without much discussion of what sort of theme organizes those things, which is not to say that they're bad arguments, but I think the negative is persuasive at explaining this sort of typical neg argument here, which is that the AF will always have sort of leg up on the neg, good for ones will always have some tricky angle on the generics, and so on. Combined with the arguments that I think that the core controversy should be organized around things like course trading or congressional debates. In general, I think that the neg is ahead on the claim that the debates would be notably worse if the AF could be agencies. The main part of this debate is reasonability. This is a little tough. I think you have most of the pieces that you would need in a typical reasonability 2AR. I think there's a couple that you're missing. The first is I also do not have an arbitrariness argument. Like maybe the 1AR is going fast, I just missed it. Like I could have just not written it down and maybe it was there, but like the 1AR is going real fast and I'm like writing down words that you're saying as fast as I can, but like I did not interpret any argument the 1AR made as their interpretation is arbitrary. Again, could be me, but maybe speaks to the fact that a couple of judges also didn't catch it. I think a more developed argument about arbitrariness is important to establish why their interpretation couldn't be predicted, why it's actually an example of moving the goalposts to exclude the affirmative in place of substantive debate, and so on. Number two, for reasonability, I think you need some discussion of what good debates look like. That is, you are arguing that topicality crowds out good substantive debates, but you are not really forwarding an affirmative theory of what the good debates would be under your vision of the topic. You say energy mix, and like that's fair, but that's never really explained like why that's the case, what is good about those debates relative to the sort of devil in the details thesis that they have forwarded about the quality of the debates that they think should happen under their interpretation, and so on. This is sort of the biggest problem with going for functional limits over everything, which is that you're sort of fighting a rearguard action and just attempting to argue that the debates wouldn't be that bad, which you might be right about in truth, and that is the thesis of reasonability in some ways, like you are not trying to make an offense-defense focused argument, but I do think you need some substantive vision of high-quality good debates if your reasonability offense is that T crowds out those good debates.
Cool. I can go next. I don't differ a lot with the other RFDs. I thought that there was enough of a difference between the two interpretations that the potential substance crowd out did in that way. One thing that I'll add, which was important for me, I thought the neg also kind of had like intact his argument. That's like we all agree that subsets are possible, and so if all these small apps are there, it's kind of try or die for having the statutory signal that only statute provides that the executive doesn't provide. Kind of what was said earlier. Now, is it true that like businesses don't look to executive agencies when making like decisions about these things? I don't think so, but like the neg does assert it, and I don't have like a good clear response. Also, I thought politics was like the neg got a lot of leeway, which is like politics is actually a key like piece of negative ground on this topic. 2NR said something in line with like the reason why this stuff isn't happening is because of political backlash, and so I think more to that effect would have been helpful. I also agree with Callahan that they were doing okay on like implementation. Like we should look at the ways that these policies are implemented, like devil in the detail. They actually read like card running. The cards weren't that good, but like they did read cards on, so that's something I guess. Lastly, reasonability itself. I also didn't have arbitrariness flowed in the 1AR. If it was there, I felt like it was very brief. What would have done it for me? like I kind of like on a truth level agree that the like definitions like for constraining it's just Congress aren't that good. And I felt like if you combine the reasonability argument with a strong arbitrariness push starting in the 1AR, just being like these cards mentioned it could be Congress, it's not exclusive. It's really dumb to interpret adopt as only applying to Congress. It's probably written in the context of one congressional action and just kind of like do the evidence comparison. I would be a lot easier to sell on. You don't need to win like offense, defense. Your vision is better if the definition, the interpretation itself is arbitrary. So that's where I land.
I don't really know what else to say. Like, the only thing I would add is, like, you need a structural argument for why the topic, rather than negative generics, constrains the amount of apps that are possible under your interpretation. Like, you at no point offer a reason why any of the theoretical apps that they are sort of listing off aren't possible or aren't feasible things that the app can show up to a debate round and read. Like, whether that is just, like, there aren't solvency advocates for those things, they don't have unique advantages, they lose to advantage from. Like, there's never any debating of those things, and so it just makes it very difficult for me to conclude that, like, being app is so impossible in their interpretation that I think that, like, there is a world for the negative under yours. The other thing is, like, you're debating the terminal impact to reasonability, and the terminal impact to reasonability is way too intertwined with the assumption that you're gonna win a strong app round to just add to their interpretation. And so the ultimate conclusion, to my understanding of the two-area reasonability argument, is just competing interpretations, because it requires you to win that they actually traded off with substance and that this wasn't a necessity based on the fact that the app was untopical, and that they want a very strong limits argument. And so it's just kind of like, well, limits are huge and get to a much larger impact that is, you know, larger than your interpretation, and there's no sort of impact for why I should defer affirmative even if that is true. And so at that point, it's just kind of like competing interpretations becomes automatic, and they win a big limits impact, so just like outweighs yours.
I personally don't have any questions.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
I have like 3 quick ones.
I'll offer one quick thing, which is just in general. I think I'm nag on do you link to democracy bad.
Really?
Just to offer that for
that is
future
useful.
debates or whatever. Like I kind of think, given the way the 1AC was written, that like I think you're probably
I was
better off
closer to. I had to like look at the evidence.
I don't want you can leave. Like I don't want to keep keep this, but
Show of hands. That was my first question. Show of hands. Democracy bad. Yes, no link. Who's with Callahan?
I didn't read the cards yet, so I don't know.
Okay.
I'm in the middle. I'm not sure.
I'm
I was
looking
thinking-
Okay,
So
yeah.
like maybe 55-45 neg
I'm
app.
skeptical of uniqueness based
Okay.
on the 1AC card, but
Anyway,
I'm not
Like,
sure.
I think there needs to be a card that is like the US will become a dictatorship now if they don't do, if the plan doesn't happen, which
Okay.
is like just not their argument. So
Okay. That leaves the second. 2 in our choice to go for D, correct instead of trade. How are we feeling on the horse trading thing? Did you think there was a link given the plan's not
you
Congress?
just went there Congress. Oh no.
You have to go for T and force trading since they're not in Congress. Doesn't it also take out the link to VA?
Do you not think that political backlash to a pricing thing? Like, I thought our cards were generic enough that say like carbon pricing causes backlash.
I don't know, I didn't read the
Okay.
cards. Maybe not.
yeah, but also like that's not carbon
Okay.
pricing.
I was kind of feeling democracy bad.
Okay.
What about the V interpretation? I thought that was
So
the 2R.
that was my sort of last question. Was like
That was on me.
the arbitrariness thing. I think gets like we've defined every word in the res. We've defined a card that says US of G does not mean all branches. It's like the violation card. Like it's like the card's horrible, but it says it, and then the definition of the.
That's not in the
Like,
doc.
should that have been a bigger thing? It was in the 1 in R, but like 2 in R didn't really say that. Like
When you went for T, I thought that was going to be at the top.
Me too.
we thought about it, but like we didn't really say anything about that. We just read a card that said the, and then we just like I didn't
It's
know.
like it's a violation. They didn't counter-define the word or say that it didn't apply, so it's like, I don't know.
And then
It's functionally aspec, but like whatever.
I was worried about we meet. If the 1AR said we meet, how viable do you think this is? Given just like they said they could be Congress.
I think that's I think like part of the app strategy should just be that we meet like app would certainly include some Congress and then just like debate the trade PA. Like that seems much easier than this.
Well, the 1AR says we could meet, like plan in a vacuum S thing, and then goes to trade DA. Like, I mean, that feels like it puts us in a horrible spot. Like,
Yeah.
then we have to go for both.
Yeah.
Are you still like more app on we meet, we could be Congress plus no link on the trade DA?
I mean, I think it's showing out that it's like they need for we meet to be viable, they need to prove that there's some mandate of the plan that would necessarily involve Congress.
Okay.
And then if they don't do that, then just like I think that it's still a very viable 2 in R.
Yeah, I'm not sure what we could meet means.
Yeah,
I do not think we could meet is the best way for the app to debate that argument. I think it is
I would
we
be
meet or we do not.
sympathetic to tomorrow. It's like what the fuck.
Okay.
And then also like if you can interpret normal means evidence that they have, and just make like a
the last one is like, I think this is the check on the topic, and like we went for it earlier, and like I've been gauging temperature. Like, how do we feel about just like the truth of this? Like, yeah, just like agencies are like really unlimiting. Like,
I'm much better for subsets, I think. Personally.
Okay.
When I see the court's counterpoint in one of your 1MCs, I'll believe it. But like, I haven't seen anybody ever read the court's counterpoint. Like, I don't know.
Okay, we'll take you up on that.
I don't know about the age. Like, okay, so me, this is my first turn.
Yeah,
so
you're fetus. More like.
I just think it's so arbitrary. Like, I think a 2AR that is just like, and a big stack of app evidence that is just like, here's a bunch of different examples of different parts of government adopting policies, just like kind of destroys this argument.
Okay.
Combined with reasonability. But it's like, I agree with you, like, the true and R is presenting a very like good model of the topic for the neg. I just think like there's not evidence that supports that it's the most predictable reading of the topic.
Do you think like, so I get like USFG means could be all branches, plus like there are other examples of adoption being agency. Do you think like a card, like the surplusage card that's like every word needs meaning, policy needs its own meaning, adopt needs its own meaning, those all need agency? Like, do you think that gets us out of it? Or do you think just like arbitrary is like really big?
It seems pretty big to me.
I don't know what the word surplus is.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's just like the category, like that's an argument, but not like an argument that's gonna like decide the debate most of the time.
I'm kind of like, yeah, with the arbitrariness and stuff.
Thank you so much. Good reading.
Thank you.
Yeah, good debate.